Hello and welcome to another video. It's been a while since I made a Codesmith review. I think we are in week 9 or so. Yeah, and I haven't made one since week 4 just because, like I said, we were going to be doing less things and doing more coding, so I wanted to make a little break. Maybe I waited a little too long, but it's okay. So we're going to get into what we covered from week 5 up till now, and let's get into it. So we started on the end of July with a database assessment, which was pretty much just like an assessment on how to use databases, how to get basic things, how to set up a model. It was on MongoDB, I believe. And yeah, it went pretty well. And then we had a lecture on build tools, and this was one of the more annoying lectures. So essentially what happens is, let me see if I have it. I think I do. So I can actually pull up some of this. But essentially what happened in the build tools is when you build a project in JavaScript, there's something called a webpack. And what a webpack does is it pretty much combines all of your files together. And in previous projects, this was made for us. But in this one, we had to make it ourselves. And so essentially you have like your components, your front end, your back end, all your stuff. And then you have this webpack config file, which essentially combines all of your stuff together. And then it puts all of your stuff into a bundle. So I don't think I have it now, but essentially what it does is it takes all of your code and it bunches it up together into a bundle. And then what happens is your code just looks like it basically becomes unreadable. I think I should be able to run it just to show you here. Let me just double check this build. Does it ever bundle anything? Maybe it doesn't. Yeah, maybe it doesn't. But essentially, I should be able to show one for a later project. Actually, I think I should be able to show one for the OSP that we're doing. Yeah. So let's see here. Source, web view, dist. Yeah, so it looks like something like this, which is essentially unreadable code. It bunches everything up together, and it makes it, it makes it fast to run and gets rid of all your white space. So essentially, we have to build this tool that did this for us, and it was definitely it's very difficult. I found it was one of the harder lectures, and we had to build a few of these. And what I would recommend once you get to this unit, there are a couple of videos of like how to build a bundle or how to build a webpack in React. So I'd probably recommend going through one of those as you're building it, and that helped me a lot. Okay. And then so after that bundle, we had a solo project, and I really like this because I personally, I don't know about like other people, but I enjoy working by myself and then just doing like meetups or every few hours. I would prefer that over working in pairs, which is nice because on the job, you're going to be working by yourself. You're not going to be working in pairs, and then you're just going to have like group meetings. So I do prefer that kind of setup. But essentially, we had a solo project where we picked something to do, and what I would recommend here a little bit is I kind of picked something a little easy because I said, oh, like I just want to finish. I want to have something presentable. But I would definitely recommend thinking like, what's something I can solve, that can like help people, where I kind of made more of just like a funny thing, and I'll show it in a second. What's something I can solve and really challenge yourself, I feel like. And also this gives you a nice chance to work with technologies that you struggled with. So if you struggle with like Redux, you can do something in Redux, or I mean you can't make something too hard because you only have 3 days. But yeah, so I can show you here. So I made something called Pokemon cards, which is essentially a binder of Pokemon cards. I think I misspelled it. Oh no, I have to. Never mind. Okay, so if I pull this one up, essentially what it is it shows you a binder of Pokemon cards. I made it kind of simple. I did create a webpack, like they showed, and I didn't really have a database for this, so I just had like a JSON file in my program that had all the Pokemon. And then I had my React, I had my server, all that stuff. But yeah, so I can actually show how that works. Let me just double check how this one builds because I don't remember 100%. So I think I can do, okay, I should be able to do this. Should work, ideally. Okay, cool. So essentially what this does is you can see like it's a Pokemon folder, essentially, and it has a bunch of pages. And what you can do is you can search for, it is a little small, so maybe I'll zoom in a bit. But let's say I want to search for like a Charizard or something, right? And I click find, and it'll find it, or I think maybe lowercase. Oh, there it is. It just took a little while. Okay, so you can just search for whatever Pokemon you want, or if you search for something that doesn't make any sense, you will not be able to find it. So if I just search for like this, it should be able to give me an error. It is a little slow right now. But yeah, so you can search for whatever you want, and then I had a bunch of other features, like you can search for whatever Pokemon you want. You can also pick a region, so if you know like some Pokemon regions, you can pick a region, and it will fill up your page. Like I said, it's a little slow, so you might have to give it some time. But it'll fill up your page with Pokemon from that region until the whole page fills up, ideally. Yeah, so there it goes. Like I said, it's a little slow. So I'll talk about while it's doing that. And then essentially this is a React app with a server that uses the Pokemon API. So I wanted to learn how to use a simple API with query strings and things like that. So that's what I made, a folder with all these things, and you can hover over them, you can delete them, you can organize them, you can do a bunch of different things. So essentially I'll just show this as it's going. So if you want to, let's say, delete something, you can do that. You can hover over them, and then let me just wait for this to finish. But essentially, yeah, you could search for whatever you want, and what it does kind of behind the scenes is it calls the Pokemon API, and then it'll have a slash, and it'll have a question mark and like a query string. So it'll say like Pokemon equals something. You know, you have to look at the API, and you had to like find the format. It would be like Pokemon equals something, and then it would try to find that essentially in its so the Pokemon API is pretty big, and it has all these different cards for Pokemon, and and you also have to learn how to use like an API key, which I definitely learned. I'll talk about that in the future, or not in the future, but for my next project, which I ran into some issues. But yeah, so essentially, yeah, so you can search for any region you want. It looks like it's a little slow, so I'm not going to show, like you can also type in all, and then that would give you every single Pokemon like out of every region possible. It would fill up the page. You can also delete a page. You can also delete a Pokemon if you click on it. Also, I made some organization issues that I thought would be good. So if I click like organize, it would organize every Pokemon by name alphabetically. And then like from having Pokemon cards myself, I just thought of like what would be useful features that I had. And then another feature I had that would organize, actually it would be type, and it organized them alphabetically, and it also organized them by like their type. Because like when I had Pokemon, maybe like you want to organize like all your rock Pokemon in like one thing, and like grass Pokemon, fire Pokemon, whatever you want, right? So I implemented some sorting algorithms to do that kind of stuff. I wasn't too happy with my styling. As you can see, it's not the best, but I was just more trying to get like a simple app going. And so I actually ended up finishing this. So we had 3 days, and I ended up getting the basic functionality in day 1 that just did some basic stuff. And then I put on all these other features pretty much all in day 2. And so day 3 was kind of like a rest day. I was just like, I just don't want to like add more stuff. I feel like it's like in a good spot. I'm a little tired. So yeah, so I definitely am not glad that I didn't challenge myself enough. But also, this was my first solo project, and I just like didn't know how long it would take. So from doing CS assignments in the past, I knew that like usually things take way longer than you think. So I gave myself a ton of time just to make sure that I could finish, and like I kind of like made it easier problem because I assumed I think it's gonna take me not too long, but usually it takes double or triple what I think. So let me just give myself a lot of time. But it kind of worked out the other way, which it is what it is. But yeah, so that's that project. So let me close this, and yeah, I can close this now, and we can look into some more stuff here. So we had 3 days, and you present it, and when you present it, you have like 90 seconds to talk about it. So as you can see, for example, there, the API was really slow, so you don't really have a lot of time to talk about it, and you do kind of practice like showing your idea in a really short amount of time, which is definitely a skill. Like if you get interviewed, like, hey, what did you do at this? You don't have 5 minutes to talk about it. You want to be kind of brief. So that is kind of useful. Although, like I said, for the demo, when I had all these calls, that took a while. Obviously, in an interview, I'm not going to like present my project, but talking about it, I will be doing. Okay. And then we had, so we also had all these tech talks, and I will say that as you're going through this, I was going to most of the tech talks, but then I either started skipping a few towards the end, or I was not paying attention. And I will say I would recommend like going to the tech talks, first of all, to support like your people that are like usually your seniors, because if you think about it, like when you're doing the tech talks, you want people to come to yours, right? So I would recommend doing that. And also what's going to help you is the tech talks will kind of introduce you to new technologies that you didn't learn about, and you're going to want to learn about them because you will have to get an idea of what to work on for your OSP. And if you don't know about any other technologies, that week is going to be a lot harder for you, but we'll get into that later. Okay, so yeah, so we had a Scratch project, and then we had the Scratch. So there was a solo project, then we had a Scratch project. So the Scratch project is pretty much, it's kind of weird. You write down basically like, I think we had like 32 people, and you write down 2 people you don't want to work with, 3 people who you would prefer the most, and then like everyone else should be like neutral. And then you get, you get paired up with people based on that. And I will give you a little bit of advice here. So the people that I picked, at least a few of them, were like probably the people that almost everyone wanted to work with. So I would kind of like, if I was to give you some advice, don't pick the people that are like the best in the class or something, because everyone's going to probably want to work with them. Kind of pick like the more people who are less known, but you still like working with, because I think your chances of working with them are higher. Because out of everyone I picked for every project, I think it was like 3 or 4, I didn't get any of my first choices for any of them. So that is something to think about, I guess, if you want to, don't pick like the most popular person or, whatever, like the best person in the class, because everyone's going to pick them. So essentially, then you have to present an idea to the fellows, and then they have to approve it. So you have to basically give like here's what I'm trying to fix, here's my solution, here's what we're going to be doing, kind of present it. And then they'll tell you a lot of like, here's what you need to do and here's what you need to cut out type of stuff, because we had a lot of ideas and they just said like, I mean, this might not be realistic, so just cut out a lot of these things and that'll make it better. So that's what we did. I will show this one as well. So let me just go to this. And funnily enough, so this was actually our Scratch project, and it was also our iteration project, meaning I iterated on it as well. So I kind of worked for this one longer than. So like here, our original Scratch project, I think had like one app. Like I was doing the front end with another person who was like really good at like styling and stuff. But essentially we didn't know that people would be iterating on our stuff. So our app was like a 300 line component. And now you can see it's broken down because the group that iterated on it was me and some other people. But then I worked on the back end for the iteration where I made like all this. But I'll get into that. So yeah, so now I'll do a little quick demo of it. So let me see how this one opens. And yeah, you can see just like a little tutorial here. So you can see that, for example, when you hit start, it'll say, okay, node mon server JS. So that means start turns on your server, build builds your webpack, and then dev will turn on your webpack. So essentially you have to do npm start and npm dev, so you need 2 different terminals. So actually I do think I need to open up 2 terminals, and I can do that as well. So I can just do new terminal here, and I can do like npm start here. I should be able to in theory. Let's see. Okay, and it's connected. And then on my other one, I should be able to just do npm run dev, and that will, so you'll learn about that once you do the webpack, that you have to have a server and a client. And so here's like your fitness tracker. I don't know if I have my database on necessarily. I might not, but let's see. Yeah. So I think, I don't know if I have my database connected, but I'll just write some stuff. So this is essentially what we had in our Scratch, where you write down some stuff. I can write down like Bob Ross 123 password, Bob Ross 123. And yeah, so essentially you fill out a form. And you can also log in. Like I said, I haven't looked at this in a while, so it might be like buggy because my database might not be on or whatever. But essentially, this all worked before, so maybe we'll have some issues. We'll see. Okay, it does work. So basically what it does, at least for our original version, is you have a current weight, you have a target weight, and you just write down your calories that you eat. So let's say you eat like 2,000 calories, and you want to lose some weight, which you can change, right? So you can update your weight and your goal weight and things like that. And you could say like, okay, maybe I want to go from 200 to 180 in, I don't know, 60 days. And you write down your activity level, and then it tells you. So I do think that when when people iterated on this, I feel like they changed something, because it used to like kind of calculate correctly. Now it's a little weird, where it's like if you eat 2,000 calories a day and you burn, I mean, maybe it's a little accurate. I'm not sure. But yeah, so let's say you eat 3,000 calories a day. Okay, so there you go. So you could see like, it basically, you write down the calories you eat a day, you want to write down how many days, and then what's your activity level, which influences your like basal metabolic rate. And then this tells you like what you need to burn. And so it also should persist sessions. I think it's like broken now because I haven't used it in a while. So yeah, I do think it's like kind of screwed up. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like it is. So essentially, yeah, but it did work before. Like I said, I haven't looked at it in a while, so that's also going to happen. But when we presented it, everything worked. It persisted your sessions. It could log you out, all that stuff. And that was our scratch. And then if I go back here, so we did our scratch. We presented it. It was good. So the problem was in our main idea for the scratch, I actually wanted this to be a fitness, not like a calorie counter type thing where it gives you calories. I wanted it to give you like fitness advice or like weight loss advice. And we ended up scrapping it because we just didn't think we'd have enough time. And so for the iteration part, I wanted to add that. And so that's what we did. So now this did give you fitness advice. And essentially what happens is you go to like a plan, you pick an exercise or a diet plan, you write down all these things, and then you click submit. And I think it's broken right now because so I'll talk about this. So essentially what I did is what I called the OpenAI API, where you write down all these things, and then you make a query string saying like, hey, I'm like a fitness person that likes to run, bike, swim, whatever you put in. My experience is this, give me a workout plan. And then, like I said, this is broken right now, I think, so yeah. But normally it works. So the other thing that happens is when you, so I can kind of show this. So essentially in your project, so I could show like that I called the OpenAI API. Like I said, it's a little broken right now, but yeah. So here it is. You use OpenAI API, you use an API key, and so your API key should be in your .env file. And what happens is, and I realized this, if you put API keys in like a server, like if you just write like my API key, instead of having a variable here, you just like take a API key from a site and you put it in your server and then you upload your stuff to GitHub, then your GitHub has like your API keys, which are your private keys, which you don't want to happen. Because let's say someone gets your API key, they can use your API key to, do something that might cost money. Like using OpenAI, for example, I bought like a subscription. And so obviously I think I set like a low limit, but let's say you have a subscription with a high limit and people can just like use your API key and that's not good. So what you want to do is you want to put your API keys in another file, and then in your GitHub, you can just put it in your gitignore. So if you see your gitignore, it's not, so that is something I would recommend as well. Like make sure you put your API keys in your env file, put that in your gitignore. That way they're not being uploaded to GitHub, and then you can just use that key, whatever that variable is. You can just say process-env, open API key, and then, yeah. So because so OpenAI does, when you upload it to GitHub, like OpenAI does catch it, and it just terminates your key. So I just got some emails saying like, hey, your key was found in GitHub, so we just terminated it, which is useful, but not everyone does that. So definitely look out for that. But yeah, so essentially you got an exercise plan, you got a diet plan, same kind of thing. You write down your allergies, you write this down. It'll give a form with your something like, here's my allergies, I need a diet plan for this many days, based on what you wrote. And then also the other features we added. So we did add like an upload pics before and after, but I think this worked on the person's who was presenting computer, because he had a specific, I think like an Imgur or something account, so I can't really show that here, but essentially that did work as well. But we also added a feature that, like, let's say you want to update your weight to 160. I forgot how it worked. I think it's like this, yeah. So now you're trying to gain weight, and so if you're trying to gain weight, let's say you eat like, I don't know, 1,500 calories, and you want to get to 180 in like 90 days, your activity level is 3, then it just tells you like, here's how much more you need to eat, and then we made some like memes for it and stuff. But yeah, that was essentially our iteration project. So it was like a fitness app. Like I said, most of it worked when all of it worked when we presented it, but some of it broke afterwards because I think people were like uploading and like making requests and whatever. And I think also, I don't even know if I have like the completely final like version of this in my computer. I feel like it might be on someone else's repo, because essentially they teach you how to make pull requests and make sure not to just upload your stuff directly to a main branch of a GitHub, because that's not great for production. Like you don't want to just like upload your stuff to the main branch, because what if you made mistakes? You're just overriding the main like repository, which isn't good. So there's a lot of like protection they teach you on that. But yeah, so afterwards, so we had our iteration. Once again we had like 90 seconds or something to talk about it, I think. And actually I think it was like 3 minutes for iteration and scratch, because we had a team of 4. And then we had a talent show, and then a talent show I just showed off like my pets or something. So if you want to go to that, it was pretty funny. We learned that pretty much everyone in the cohort above us, or in a lot of ours, were either like musicians or like singers or something. It was nuts. Like half the cohort could play the guitar, something like that. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, essentially, then we had our graduation assessment, which people were pretty nervous for because they tell you that. So you're learning like React and Redux and stuff, but your graduation assessment is on like vanilla DOM for the app. So essentially, you have an algorithm section where, yeah, like you have an algorithm. I think they even tell you, yeah. So algorithm, or I guess they don't say it, but you have an algorithms thing for 2.5 hours where you do like, I think we had like 3 or 4 algorithms and a data structure, like design some data structure. And it was funny. I got a little nervous because so normally I was like really good at these things because I think like because I do algos all the time in my YouTube channel, they're like the ones in the cohort are considerably easier than like I'd say now we were getting to like probably LeetCode mediums to I mean I can probably actually pull it up here. So let's take a look. I can show some of these. So if I go to CD, where's it at? I think there's a hack hour. Yeah, I can show some of it. Code. Probably get rid of some of these tabs. So get rid of this. Get rid of this. Hopefully this is the one. Yeah, so this is like all the ones we did so far. So like some of these are LeetCode easies. Some of them are LeetCode mediums. Like you have matrix transpose, it's like a LeetCode medium. You have some like max depth stuff, LeetCode easy, you know, and so on. So it really just depends. And then you also had some JavaScript specific stuff like throttle. You had some other stuff. But yeah. So for the most part, they were pretty much LeetCode easies, LeetCode mediums. We didn't really have any LeetCode hards. But then the first one on the grad assessment was actually kind of like I think it was like not too hard. It just had a lot of like edge cases, and so I kept getting like the wrong stuff, and I was getting really frustrated. And it took me like 30 minutes to do it or 25 or something, and I was like, wow, like I only have 2.5 hours, and I, you know, like I was like, am I gonna finish in time? And then it got like a lot easier after that one, so it was like super downhill from there. I think that we had something on, I'm not gonna say exactly what, but essentially I wrote it backwards, and then I realized I wrote it backwards, but I don't even know if they like saw that. So, but yeah, so that was fine. Then we had the graduate assessment part 2, which was a lot, and so yeah, the whole day is just a grad assessment. And you have to build an app for the part 2 from scratch. And they tell you like don't use any material you had, like don't use any of your work from before, don't just like copy paste work from before, because if you did that, like it would essentially do most of it for you. But essentially you had to build a CRUD app that, you know, had a database, use it, so it just used the DOM. It didn't really have React, so the front end was pretty straightforward, like you just had a DOM. But most of us haven't used vanilla DOM since like week 2, so we were like pretty rusty. So essentially you have Friday to study for it, and I would recommend on Friday to just build a basic CRUD app. You know, like I think most of us just built some kind of task thing where you can just like add tasks and delete tasks to like a database and have a server, just like a basic Express server with like 1 or 2 routes, you know, that has like an HTML file that serves and like all that stuff. Yeah. So I did that, and then also, yeah, I think we had some like OAuth as well, for, like cookies and some of that. So I think that was more like a optional. Like they did tell you to do it, but I think if you didn't get that part done, it's okay. But essentially, what happens is depending on how well you do on these. So if you do badly on the algos, I believe you have to retake it. Same thing for the app, but I think if you do okay, and then there was just like one section then that you screwed up, then you just essentially do an APC on that section. And you don't have to like retake it, because I really didn't want to have to retake like a 4-hour exam, and luckily I didn't. I think they said I did fine and everything, so I didn't feel like redo anything. But yeah, like the app definitely from scratch. Like I was super used to just like copy pasting code from my old stuff. I didn't remember code like off the top of my head. So definitely would recommend studying the day before, building an app the day before. I think that would help, because then you're kind of like doing the same thing during the exam essentially. So it would definitely help you remember all your stuff. Yeah, so the next week we had and it was kind of weird, and we didn't really know what to do. But it was the first week of Codesmith that we didn't have any lecture or anything whatsoever. It was literally, we had an open source group, and we worked on, you essentially have to research technologies to work on, and so you do get invited into OS Labs. and then you get to see. Actually, I don't know if we even got invited, but we looked into OS Labs. So there are, I think they gave us like 6 or 7 projects that were done, and then you can look into like let me see some of these. Like I think React Relay was like a new one. No, maybe not. Let me look. See if there. I can definitely recognize some of them because they had like a ton of developers who I think React Type for sure someone worked on. Yeah, so you can see like 3,000 commits, ton of people working on it. So essentially, and you can see like it's pretty impressive. So you either make something brand new or you iterate on something. But the thing is, for iterating something, you could do it. But the thing is, there's a lot of code, right? And if 60 people work on something, it's going to look pretty good. So it's definitely going to be hard to add stuff to it. Like you can see, it's like a lot. Like here's the whole file structure of the thing. I think a lot of these are like really big files. I think there's like, I haven't looked into it too much, but yeah. So let's take a look just real quick. Reducers, root reducer, like, okay, not that one. Let's see here. This is CSS. Yeah. So essentially, yeah, you can see like there's like 5 reducers and so on. So yeah, oh, here's a big, okay, here we go. So here's like 1,000-line reducer. And so is that something you want to do? So that will give you practice. And you can see like all these things that they used as well, like Tailwind, all these things. So it's kind of up to you. Do you want to iterate over something, which is kind of more like, you go to a company, they have a code base, and then you're actually doing stuff, or do you want to make something of your own? And if you make something of your own, there's also difficulties there because like the other thing is like you have to essentially say like here's some technology and here's a problem with it and here's my solution, but you don't want to do something like that's out there already. Ideally, I mean obviously most things are out there already, so it's okay if you do something out there, but if you just say like I want to make a visualizer for React components, like that's like the most common thing anyone did. And so for something like that, you might want to add more stuff to it, right? Maybe you could say like I can show routes from the server to the client and so on. So essentially we had to like come up with all these ideas, and then we sent like our ideas. We sent like a few projects to our fellows, and then they slowly told us like what we could and we could not do. And then our OSP actually ended up being on Next.js. And so I can show, I'm not going to go too far into the OSP, but I will show like kind of the problem we had and our solution and so on. So, and then I'll just do like an OSP demo in the next video probably, which I'll probably do after we do our OSPs, which I think is in like 2 weeks. So, because I don't want to make this too long, but I think making a weekly video also at this point, like we're just not doing enough new things. So there's not enough content there. But yeah, essentially, if you look, actually this is the wrong one. If I do this, ls cd, I actually want to go to, hopefully I have this, yeah, Next.js tutorial. Essentially what I did is me and another person found like a really good Next.js tutorial, which essentially is like a framework for React, and pretty much, okay, probably don't want to show that. Yeah, so essentially what it made like, it was like a follow along like 3-hour video to make an app in Next. So we really learned how it worked, at least enough to like do something on it. But essentially the problem with Next, as you can see, so here's your source. Every single component has like the same file names. And so this gets kind of annoying, right? Like imagine you're navigating through this and you're like, which page module, like there's 100 of them. Which page am I on? Like they're all called page. So essentially our solution was to make a visualizer for Next components that would show you your folder, your files, and then you can like delete routes, add routes. You can like click on a file, it would open the tab up easier. So you can just have a tree of your file structure on the right, in like an actual visualizable tree, and then you can click on all your files and it'll open the pages and do a bunch of stuff. Okay, so yeah, so that's essentially what it is. I'm not going to go too more into depth than that for now. And then essentially we started our senior portion. Also, so as far as our new technologies, so we thought that we should do it in JavaScript, but we wanted to incorporate TypeScript, but the fellows pretty much said like, no, just do it in TypeScript, like just go learn TypeScript. So I watched a TypeScript tutorial the week before this week, or not this week, but last week, and then I started doing basically leak codes in TypeScript. So I would recommend that as well. So I can actually pull this up, and if you've been following my TypeScript videos, That's part of the reason I've just been doing LeetCodes in TypeScript. So essentially, I made a new TypeScript config, learn how to use the TypeScript config, and start just coding stuff up in TypeScript. And I think at this point, like I've only been doing it for like 2 weeks, and I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on it. So if you know JavaScript, it's not too bad to learn TypeScript. Like it is a little annoying, like be like, what's this record thing? What are these? Why is it throwing all these errors? You know, like what are all these things in the config? But as you get better at it, I mean, obviously I still have a lot to learn, but I have a good enough understanding to just like our whole project now is in TypeScript that we're coding in, and I have no issues using it. Okay, and so yeah, so we started. So this was kind of cool too, also starting the senior group, because essentially now you have the mentor, or you have the mentee, because I had a mentor in the junior portion, and my mentor actually became a fellow for this portion. I'm not going to like say any names, but yeah, he became a fellow for this portion, so a lot of people liked him. And then I have a mentee now who I help and stuff like that. So for this week we were doing, or for this was last week, so we were doing code reviews with our mentees, and a lot of the seniors didn't really like want to do a lot of the, well, not so much didn't want to do, but like didn't look forward to a lot of these, because it was like data structures, algorithms, and a lot of them don't like it and stuff. But obviously for me, like since I do it for a lot of the, like I think we had like a 6-person group where it was like 3 seniors, 3 juniors, and then they were just like, all right, let's just pass it on to Anatoly, and he'll just like do stuff, and so we don't have to explain algorithms to people, which is whatever. But yeah, so we did our kickoff OSP, and essentially the whole week we were just doing OSP coding with our groups, and now the senior portion is a lot more kind of like independent. You do have some lectures, but for the most part you are just doing OSPs with your group, and you're more independent. And also you have to pick a subject for your tech talk, and so I chose to do TypeScript, which, looking back, I mean, I feel like I know it enough. Like I think it's one of those like easy tech talks to do. Maybe I could have challenged myself a little more. And I think it's in like 2 weeks or something, so I'm not like, I think I know enough about it to like, you know, don't have to do too much, because it's not a new technology I haven't used before or anything. Like I've been using it for the last 2 weeks, so it's pretty good. Yeah, so essentially we were just working on our OSPs for the most part. Then we had a TypeScript unit, and by the time we got to the TypeScript unit, I already did a week of TypeScript, so this was like pretty straightforward. It was just like rebuild your tic-tac-toe or something in TypeScript, and I was like super comfortable with that. Yeah, and then essentially, yeah, we just practice our tech talks, and then this week, same kind of thing. We were doing our OSP coding, and the juniors had their presentations on the snake games. And actually, I think our junior class is really impressive, to be honest. Like their snake games were pretty ridiculous, considering this was only week 2 of their cohort. Like they were really, really good. And like my mentee also had like a really good one and stuff. So yeah, it was definitely impressive. And then we had, so yeah, we also started getting into the hiring portion, which is like, I'm excited to get into that. I think that's a big reason why I joined Codesmith, getting into the hiring portion. So they talked about like what to do, what not to do, how to start your resume. I think for right now, we're just kind of doing, you know, first presentation of a resume. And yeah, so this whole like Friday. So we had our MVP, let's see here. I think this was this week. Yeah. So we had our senior presentation for the MVP, which is essentially, we showed our MVP, and like I said, I'll show the final thing in like a week or 2 once it's all good. So we actually, just to briefly talk about it, we actually had like all of our features that we wanted. And the MVP is basically like, what's the minimum viable product that you were trying to achieve? And now we're putting in stretch features, you know, like what are some other cool things we could do, you know, make it look nicer, things like that. And there's also a lot to do, like you have to make a website. So we're going to make a website in Next.js. You have to write a Medium article. You have to make a GitHub repo. You have to make a README. There's like a bunch of like small things. And also during the next few weeks, we're going to have some units. So there's going to be less time and like tech talks and stuff. And then, yeah, the juniors had a hackathon, which was also, like I said, pretty impressive. And yeah, so we did our OSP code review. And so Friday was basically a full resume day where they kind of showed us, here's what you do in a resume, here's what you don't do in a resume, here's really what you don't do in a resume, what to include, what not to include. A lot of questions. They give you like a whole resume guide, kind of like here's how you make a resume. And then they give you like a channel in your Slack, like here's your resume channel, you know, start up the resume. And then they said just upload like the last resume you had. Yeah, and then also start like working on your first iteration of the resume, and then get that done in a week, and then we'll kind of like go over it and then give you feedback, and then you're going to work on more iterations, because for resumes you're pretty much constantly redoing it. So they're going to show us like how to add our OSPs, you know, what to add, what not to add. Like for me personally, probably not going to add things like, you know, scratch project, solo project, like all these like 3-day projects, I don't think it's like worth it. Um, but the OSP I will add, right? That's like the big selling point. You're working on it for like 4 weeks. You do actually something pretty impressive. You solve an actual problem, which is like that's kind of the thing. Like if your resume just says like I built a rock paper scissors game, like no one really cares. So your resume should say like I tried to solve this developer problem that they had. Here's what it was. Here's how I solved it. Here's like my performance metrics. Like how did it help exactly? Like let's say made it like 50% faster for someone to do something, or things like that. You actually want like concrete data and numbers, because yeah, if someone just sees that you made React Tic Tac Toe, like okay, so you either want to show things that you were passionate about, that you solved problems for, or an actual developer tool, which is the thing that they want your OSP to be. So every OSP is a developer tool. But yeah, so essentially, I was writing that, and then we were coding in our OSPs today. We actually ran into some issues, so we kind of have to like revert our code. But yeah, and then I was writing my resume today. And so I'm going to try to have that done by next week, try to get that iterated upon, like try to figure out what to, like how to put in my OSP, how to fix everything. I also have like a lot of weird background stuff that I'm probably not going to say exactly what it is, but essentially it's kind of like non-traditional background that they basically said just write everything you had, and then they will kind of like edit out what they don't think they need. Because like I had a lot of education that might not have been tech related, and some other stuff that wasn't tech related, but it was also challenging. So I did have a lot of issues when I did my resumes before, even though I got some okay interviews. I think a lot of it was because I wrote some stuff that shouldn't have been on there, or didn't write some stuff that should have been on there, and so on. So it's definitely going to be good to learn from someone who specifically specializes on resumes to learn how to do that. So I'm definitely excited on doing that. And then just a look ahead for next week, we're going to be doing our OSP coding, and then we will be introduced to DevOps, like Docker, actually deploying our app. So for our case, our extension is actually a VS Code extension. So we don't need to like have a login. We don't need to deploy it, right? It's just going to be on VS Code. So we have to figure out how to get it in like the extension marketplace, and so on. And yeah, I'll get into like issues and like debugging and all that stuff in our OSP. Maybe for, like I said, I'll probably just do another one of these when we present our OSP, and then that way I could like talk about my OSP for like 20-30 minutes as the video. But yeah, so we're doing that. We're doing CI/CD, and then we're talking to like fellows, and then whiteboarding. And I think my tech talk is somewhere around here, because I figured like probably wouldn't need too much practice whiteboarding. I mean, it depends how hard the questions are, but like yeah. So that's when my tech talk is. That's also why I picked in TypeScript. Like I felt like probably a day or two I'd have it done. Like I know enough to present in TypeScript already. I just have to figure out like how to make it interesting. It's not like a new topic that I have to research or anything. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. It was probably a long one, but hopefully you enjoyed it. And yeah, so I haven't been making videos for the last 4 weeks, so hopefully you guys caught up to date. I didn't drop out of Codesmith. Things are going great. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.